Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to our webinar, Honey, I Shrunk the Employee Turnover Using Machine Learning. Let me introduce myself. I am Laura Belyea and I'm the Chief Operating Officer and the co-founder of Talivest. And the reason we're doing this webinar is, we're out there and we are talking at different events and we're talking with our different customers. And the number one concern that always comes up is around employee turnover. Now, can anybody guess how much, for example, in the US, employee turnover costs in 1 year? $1 billion. So it's very, very expensive and, obviously a real concern out there. So what we're going to do today throughout this webinar is we're going to tell you how we reduce employee turnover for our customers and how you can do it as well. So I'd like to thank everyone. I know when you were signing up for the webinar, you submitted some questions to us, and we've done a lovely word cloud to reflect some of the questions that were asked. And we are going to leave the questions for the end of the webinar and hopefully be able to address as many as we can. If not, the good news is that we're going to be following this webinar up with a white paper that will be available in a couple of days for everyone. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to the star of our webinar, Luke.
Thank you, Laura. So hey everybody, so today I'm going to talk about how you can, or how we have, reduced employee turnover with one particular company by 30% within 6 months using machine learning. So just really focus on the slide for a second. 30%, massive number. We all lose top talent every year. And being able to really understand how you lose top talent and being able to reduce that figure by 30%, it's a massive achievement. And today, my job is about motivating and inspiring you to attack this problem. And I'm going to go through a step-by-step process on how to do that and also show you what we're doing right now in the space. So I believe that context is really important. Myself and Laura will go through this. But just a little bit of context about me is always important. So I actually came from LinkedIn. Next slide there. So I came from LinkedIn. I ran sales intelligence for EMEA. And so most of the models that I designed, built, rolled out globally using machine learning are still live today. And so one of the most popular ones was around customer success. So it was actually understanding what accounts for risk. And so what actions to basically take to solve that. So, and ultimately to push sales reps and customer success managers, what actions and what content to use to ultimately get those accounts to re-engage. So machine learning, it's an old concept. The automotive industry has been using it since the mid-80s. We're just really starting to see its true potential, especially in the HR industry. And today we're going to go and talk about just its true potential. So first thing is first, okay? Before I talk about my dog, Bear, this is Bear here. So Bear, he actually, he came from a rescue shelter. He was supposed to be a guide dog and he is absolutely fantastic. He's very inquisitive, very curious. So every time you see Bear, he is going to, so our moderator is going to throw questions out there that you guys are actually asking, okay? So the first question here at the moment is, what is people analytics? So there's a lot of definitions out there. If you go to Google, there's tons of them, but the definition that I like the most is ultimately it's insight that drives us in HR to make the most informed decisions. Now, insight, that can be broken down to descriptive analytics, so you can have prescriptive or even predictive analytics. And so throughout this webinar, we're going to try and make the most use of our time. We're going to go through those definitions and how they're relevant to you. So we're just experiencing a little bit of a delay here, but so quickly I'm going to talk about Talivest. So Talivest, we're all about the employee life cycle, okay? And so we have communities and we have surveys that ultimately understand and drive engagement across the different stages of the employee life cycle. My main focus is understanding, so I pull data from surveys, from the onboarding, the engagement, the offboarding or exits, that part of the employee life cycle to understand key points of pain and to drive decisions within HR to stop top talent from leaving and ultimately drive their engagement through the roof so that they really make a difference within that company. So today, I'm going to talk about, quickly I'm going to talk about just the front end product. So ultimately this was an idea that became an initiative, that became a business case. So I came to Laura And I said, listen, this is something that we can achieve. We tried it out with one customer. We managed to reduce their employee turnover by 30% within 6 months, and ultimately became a product. So I'm going to quickly show you this product, okay? And just like how, like, because ultimately you are going to have to think about that. Once you build the intelligence, you're going to have to create a front end that people can understand, and ultimately they can make those informed decisions. So this part is really important. So we'll start with front end, and then we'll go to the back end and the step-by-step process you can take there. But so it says Amy. So every single model that I build ultimately has a name, and that name is usually inspired by the person that was driving me insane during the time I built that model. So Amy, at the time, spent the weeks that I spent building this model, Amy was that person. So Amy is all about making the best loop possible. We're all about, you know, reducing turnover and creating the best culture fit possible. Amy was all about the best loop possible. So she was telling me to, you know, have a shave, have a haircut, you know, clean your Land Rover, sell your Land Rover, never drive a Land Rover again. So I'm a Land Rover enthusiast, by the way. And so, yeah, that was Amy. So this model is Amy. So we're going to quickly go through, okay? So step one, okay, ultimately, we're going to talk about just the top section of a dashboard. So every single company has ultimately a priority metric. So we provide a filter so that you can decide which one it is. But the NPS is a really, really important one. It's one that Laura has used, like, in all her experience with all the different companies she's led. It's really, really important. So the Net Promoter Score. Now, for any of you that aren't familiar with this metric is derived from the question, how likely would you be to recommend this company to a friend or family, or whatever it is? And so how it works is, if you answer from 0 to 6, this is out of 10. If you answer from 0 to 6, it's a negative. From a 7 and 8 is a neutral, and 9 and 10 is a positive. And how the score works is all about that 9 and 10. And, you know, ultimately you want to get as many of them as possible, because if anybody answers from 0 to 6, it subtracts from that score. Okay, now people ask about NPS quite a lot. I personally think it's a great metric. Where it gets really interesting is where you compare and contrast it between the NPS with your customers versus the NPS internally with your employees, because that's where the real magic happens, and you're trying to understand why they contrast or why they actually merge. Okay, so we're going to quickly go into this piece, which is, it's all about the employee turnover. It's about driving action to reduce employee turnover. So if you look at the very bottom here, okay, tenure. So context is extremely important. So we provide it here because ultimately it's about understanding, so when people actually are leaving. So when you see that 20 employees are at risk of leaving in the next 6 months, okay, and you actually look at them, it turns out they've only been there for 6 months. As you can see here, that's a problem, because you can see on average, most employees are there between 1 to 3 years, okay? So the tenure piece, really important. Now, the dash there, it actually shows that 200 people are at risk, and it showed the dollar amount. So this is really important, because the model is all about exposing and highlighting how many people are at risk of leaving in the next 6 months, okay? Now that's really important, because we're highlighting the pain, and then we're highlighting the impact, okay, for the business. So that's step one. But then the next step is ultimately it's, okay, so what's causing that? So we actually highlight the key drivers. So it could be down to management, it could be down to culture, environment, it could be down to holidays. So this is ultimately, I'm very passionate about finding the source of the problem. There's nothing worse when you go to a mechanic or you go to a doctor and they confirm that you have a problem, but they don't tell you where the problem is. So we're really passionate about actually going right down into the nitty-gritty details and highlighting exactly where the problem is. So if we take management for an example, okay, you can actually click on management, and then you can actually see individual comments. Now, by the way, so GDPR compliant, we do not highlight any identities. And so Laura will actually talk about just the benefits of our data is going to be pulled from anonymous surveys. So the thing is, like, we work off the rule of 7, which means if the number goes less than 7, we cannot go into the nitty-gritty details, because we do not highlight any identities. But going back to this, when you click on management, you can actually see the comments that are attributing to that key risk factor. So you can actually see within management that the manager isn't communicating, the manager is not, or the management team are not providing PTO, or even just there's a poor work-life balance. So things that are really important that ultimately highlight to you what the problems are, so you can make that informed decision. So the thing is, we've talked about ultimately high level, okay? So we've highlighted the problem, we've highlighted how many people are at risk, the dollar impact, so you can say that to your decision makers, or to your CEO, CEO, etc. We've highlighted the key drivers, and ultimately then you can narrow down into text, so you can actually really understand the nitty-gritty details. But the thing is, when you're trying to fault find at scale, you need filters. And so there's so many different filters there that you can use. So for example, you can see there, like, if you mark your employees by like the different schemes they come in on, for example, a referral scheme, you can do that. Or even when it comes to, so you can be more traditional and you can use the demographics. Okay, so for example, seniority, so the years of experience that they have to function, like are they in accountancy or are they in IT, and down to geographics, so what country, what office they're in, even down to departments. These things are really important. Strongly recommend you use them, because ultimately we're about fault finding to the nearest detail so that you can have that most informed action and drive an impact as soon as possible. So we've just shown the front end piece of a product that ultimately is reducing turnover globally. It's at scale across all of our customers, but it's not something that just I did or our team did or that Laura did. It's people analytics, okay? This is a technology, this is an approach, and this is a growing initiative for many companies. And it's just to highlight that people analytics achieve this. And so it's really to highlight that you can achieve this too. And what we're actually going to go through is how you can achieve that. And we really are, I know this analogy is used aggressively. I was at the Nordic People Analytics Summit, I was speaking about this, and every single speaker used this slide. But it's really important to highlight that we are at the tip of the iceberg. We are using a very simple version of machining. We're using random forests. And I just looked at the audience there, and the moderator just highlighted that there is a strong level of non-technical people in this webinar, okay? So I'm just going to quickly do I think we have time. Do we have time just for a definition? Okay. So a definition of machine learning. So I'm going to talk about, okay, if you were to fly to Stockholm, which I did there last week, okay, and you want to get there in less than 8 hours. So there's 3 things that you can do. You can do a direct flight with Finnair. You can swim there, okay? Or you can go there with an Irish colleague, okay? So they're the 3 different scenarios, okay? So if you go directly with Finnair, okay, so sorry, I'm actually going too fast. So there's the 3 different outcomes. So now if we were to throw 1,000 people through these outcomes, because that's what machine learning does. It goes through 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. You can decide how many times the machine goes through these different experiences, okay? But let's say we're to put 1,000 people through this. The learnings that would come back, okay, from this scenario, okay, so ultimately we want to get there in less than 8 hours, I think I said, is that if you go Finnair, on average, you get there in time, unless there is crazy weather. If you swim there, you never make it. And then
you'll hit that iceberg, maybe.
You'll hit that iceberg. And then if you go with an Irish colleague, like I did, you will be late by about 6 hours on average, okay? We had a very, very heated discussion about the benefits of onboarding. She has a lot more experience than I do in the field, but I believe I know more in the data world. But anyway, long story short, we missed our connected flight in Helsinki, and we had to get a train, to get another train to a taxi to eventually get there. So, but that's how machine learning works. Ultimately, you're driving a load of simulations to ultimately understand like what are the key roadblocks in those different scenarios so that you can be more proactive or ultimately make an informed decision. So now we're going to talk about the how, okay? And ultimately there's a step-by-step process here. So step 1 is work the floor. So what do I mean by that? When you're approaching a project like this, be it that you're an analyst or you're a business leader, somebody that has a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of passion about data, the first thing they're going to want to do is dive into that data set. And that is the wrong thing to do, okay? Ultimately, context is really important. So if you're doing this internally, you find out which department is suffering the pain, or if you're doing this externally for a product, you meet with your sales reps, you meet with your customer success reps, and you understand, you get that additional context. Because ultimately what we find is, I've worked in big data companies and small companies. Your data sets are never going to be perfect, okay? And there are going to be things that you are going to miss. You are going to have a blind side. It always happens. Work the floor first so that you have that external sight. You have that context before you start diving into the data. Okay, step two, and this is a big one. I was consulting there last week, and this happens all the time. So don't feel bad if you're one of them, because we all do it. But it's the silo effect. So last week we met with a company, and one employee could be exposed to about 5 different engagement surveys, which is crazy, because that particular company, each engagement survey was ran by a different department. So each department thought, so if an employee, let's say they left prematurely, or if they became a rock star within that company, each department thought it was one of the variables that they asked about, or it was one of the things that they drove. Wrong. This is a huge problem. So what you need to do is, absolute priority is get all that data into one place. So that individual employee, you have every single variable, so that you can actually understand that when they hit and they reach a certain outcome, be it they became a rock star, they left prematurely, you can see what the key variable was that drove that decision or that action. Okay, so beware of the silo effect, eradicate it immediately. So the next thing is about designing the questions, okay? And by the way, guys, we're almost there. We're going to start talking about questions soon, and Laura's going to talk about her insight into the market. So we're almost there. So designing the questions is so important. And just one thing to bring up, okay? So SurveyMonkey released an article not so long ago that every new page that you introduce to a survey, it reduces your completion rate by 3%. Okay, so don't be the Sheldon Cooper, don't be that person that has 211 questions to really understand, because anyone that's seen that episode, I love Sheldon Cooper, but 211 questions to understand, his idea of friendship, not good. Okay, so like it's all about ultimately the context, the richness of each individual question. Okay, you want to understand key drivers, so ask those questions around what you think is there. Speak to a workforce behavioral therapist, because they'll have new things that millennials care about that you'll need to add in, and ultimately then remember the outcome. Okay, because ultimately, like, we think about an exit data set, which is what we focused on. We focused on their tenure. Now, we couldn't pull the data because of the time. The company didn't. A lot of companies out there, they don't actually store a lot of data. Don't worry if you're one of them. So just ask the question, how long are you in this company for, and put in the threshold, they'll vote it. And ultimately that allows you then to do group analysis. You can see those people left within 6 months, what were the main things that caused them problems. Okay, so very quickly, random forests is basically the approach that I took with the machine learning piece, okay? And the reason I use this, so even back at LinkedIn with top 5 richest data sets in the world, random forest is the way to go, because ultimately it's very versatile. I always wanted to use linear regression, but university was kind of where I used that most. But it's very versatile, and ultimately, especially in a project like this, you've got a lot of variables. Like, ultimately, even if you talk about a reasonably planned survey, you've still got about 26 questions there, okay? And you can reduce it down to 20, but ultimately you've got a lot of variables there. Random forest is fantastic for small data sets with a lot of variables, so strongly recommend you take the same approach. There's a lot of stuff out there, like you can download or Studio, and there's a lot of YouTube seminars and webinars out there as well to actually explain to you how it works. Or you can reach out to me in Talivest. I'm more than happy to walk you through how this works and how it can be a benefit to you and your business. So this is a sandcastle, okay? And so I use this slide quite a lot, because ultimately it's trying to talk to you about the mechanics of how this works. So ultimately, we wanted to understand why people leave. So we focused on the exit data set, okay? And the thing is, we wanted to focus on people that left prematurely. So when you build your random forest around it, and it goes through each individual person, focus on the people that leave within 6 months, those individuals, you've got 3 types of people, right? Most cases. So you'll have that person that really loved their job but left, and that's how I felt at LinkedIn. A lot of good times there, but slightly emotional, okay? So they over-exaggerate some things. Then you have the person that wasn't really happy about leaving, wasn't really happy about their surroundings, and they kind of over-exaggerate their negative experiences. And then you've got the neutral guy, almost like an NPS. But ultimately, when you create that model, what you find is when you have those key understandings about what are the main points that drove those people to leave or even to stay longer. But when you sleeve that model, just like the bucket is doing over that sandcastle, you sleeve it over. Imagine the sand in that sandcastle is the engagement or the current employee data set. When you sleeve it over that, because of those over exaggerations, it allows you in many cases to understand or even notice the key beginnings of those pain points that start people on the route to leaving prematurely, or even maybe in 12 months' time. So it's really important that when you're approaching this, it's, especially if you're thinking of employee turnover, you definitely need to have an exit data set or an initiative around that. You need to have an exit survey, but then you need to sleeve it over that in current employee data set, because ultimately that's going to tell you which employees are at risk from what you've done, okay? And so ultimately the main mission here now, although the slide focuses on one person, can't do that because of GDPR. The point I'm trying to make with the slide is we're trying to get down to as close as we can without revealing any identities and being GDPR compliant, as close as we can to the pain point, to ultimately, so we can understand this is the pain. We have all of the context as to why that pain was created in the first place. And then you've got professionals like Laura that can basically recommend us and drive action to get us out of there, okay? That's the main mission here. And so if we look at this slide here, any of the summits that I speak at, especially like when they're primarily around data analytics or data science, you'll get a lot of analysts, scientists, holding back, or even leaders holding back initiatives such as this because they feel that they don't have enough data, it's not accurate enough, okay? At LinkedIn, a 60% accuracy was incredible for us to achieve. Now, right now, we have a 70% accuracy. This model is state of the art, it's fantastic. And we have a lot of customers that we help, and we've got a lot of different segments, so we have a 70% accuracy. But ultimately, if you're there, and let's say you start this project and you're only getting a 50% accuracy, for example, that's still a really, really good place to be, because ultimately, if you look at 100 people, you're still able to impact the lives of 50 people. So just remember that 50% is still great. Don't hold back because you don't think the accuracy is amazing. You can still make a difference. And so kind of for me to finish off and then hand back to Laura, ultimately, I just spoke about, understanding employee turnover using machine learning. But there are lots of other initiatives and lots of other things that I'm focused on, from either when I speak in Trinity or on the different summits or the different companies that I work or consult with. But right now, I'm really interested to understand, and this is why I was late for my Helsinki flight to Stockholm, I'm really interested to understand the effects of effective onboarding on the feelings of current employees. Like, do they feel more included? Does it affect diversity and inclusion? I want to understand, and that's what I'm working on right now. And other things such as external data points like email interactions. How does that really affect employee engagement? So lots of things. Any of you out there that want to have a chat to me about this, the details are there. And this is also going to be recorded so you can watch over it again, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions on or offline about any initiatives I'm working on or any initiatives you're working on. But have an open mind, because this is it's a new field. Machine learning, it's been there since the mid-80s. It's in my Land Rover, but within People Analytics, it's new. Love to talk to you about it, and I'd love to hear what you're doing. And Laura.
Great, thank you, Luke. That was great. So we have, if I check, we have about 7 minutes left for questions. So we are going to try to get through them as quickly as possible, but if for some reason people have to jump off in 7 minutes, don't worry, we're going to be doing a white paper and we're going to make sure that we address all the questions that were asked in there. Okay, so the first question that we have is from an employee experience specialist, and they're asking, how do you turn exit interview learnings into action? So what I might do is I might start off this question, and then Luke, please, if there's anything that you feel I'm missing. Yeah. So I think one of the most important things around this is, don't ask people to complete surveys unless you're actually going to listen and going to take action around it. So it's so important to get that stakeholder and leadership buy-in. Second of all, anonymous makes a massive difference. So we've done loads of research around this, and we have seen, not only from research, but firsthand from our customers, when they switch to an anonymous survey, 40% of the answers are different.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's insane. So, that is so imperative, because you want to make sure that the feedback that you're getting is actually accurate to be able to, to take action around it. The other thing that we have found specifically with exit in the research we've done is that the questions should focus on why you're leaving instead of being focused on the company that you're going to. That is a pitfall that some companies fall into, that they're more focused on, well, tell us about why, you're going to this company. Then once you get the areas, you can identify the areas to drill down on. And what we have done is we have with a lot of our customers, we've started with the exit survey with them because they feel the pain of people leaving. But then to really get that rich data, as Luke, you've spoken all about, is to start measuring things like onboarding and pulse, and then comparing those data sets to exit. So then instead of it's too late by the time they've left, you can preempt and you can put in interventions to keep the people that are currently in their organization.
And I guess, like, for me to add in, like, ultimately HR is an old industry, okay? There's a lot of HR BPs out there that ultimately know what they're doing, and it's just they suffer with their blind side. So ultimately, for any analysts that are out there, focus on the area that really is causing the most pain, i.e. employees leaving prematurely. Get the main factors that are causing that, and then go to your business partner and actually talk to them about it, because they, in most cases, will actually understand. I've seen this before, and they'll let you drive an action from them.
Yeah, exactly. And then once you design, an intervention, it's really so important to continue to measure in like real time, with that real time feedback, and make sure that, it's making an impact. And that allows you then to further get that stakeholder and leadership buy-in, because you're showing the value of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, next question. So I think this one could be for you, Luke. So how do you retain talent at junior levels?
Okay, so like we've done a lot of research around this, and so ultimately we had to build a model for a pretty big company around this too. So just like we spoke about with the machine learning piece, okay, so we are in the age of millennials, the age of job hoppers, the fact that most people these days are going to leave the job within 2 years of joining. But ultimately, within what I found was when I focused down on employees that had less than 3 years of experience, okay, and ultimately their movements within a company, what I found was that they need to be valued. Ultimately, they need to be mentored, and ultimately they have to have a great work-life balance. That's what I found across any of the companies we worked on that had this problem with junior levels.
It's a really common theme. It's a very, I think, millennial and centennial, what they value.
But it's amazing, like the business partners we were working with, even though it's such an obvious point, until they were given the data, they didn't make the decisions or actions to actually fix that within their environment. So once they made those changes, their junior level employees stayed much longer. So yeah,
that's great. And we do have some resources on our website as well around designing the workplace for millennials and Gen Z and so forth, if anybody's interested. Cool. Okay, so next question is, what can you do if you don't have the systems to record and analyze data? And, for myself, my background is in human resources, and I've worked in organizations where, we had to build it from the ground up. We didn't really have much. Yeah. So what's the kind of first step that you can take with that?
Well, just number one is it's never too late. Okay, so for any of you out there that don't have any data, I've joined startups where I was told, we don't have any data. So it's okay, so step one, just calm down. There's lots of things you can do. So most likely, if you don't have any resources and you are doing those face-to-face interviews, start off by, getting an Excel sheet. Most people, most laptops will have it, and start just recording those conversations. Try to be as categorical as you can be. So, have your 20 to 30 questions and actually fill in those answers for each employee. That's step one, but as you start to grow, my recommendation is there are a lot of platforms out there that provide survey services, such as ourselves and others. And ultimately, like, it is cheap, it's cheerful, and it's really easy to use. So my recommendation is, like, when you get to a point where you need to scale, because ultimately face-to-face interviews, they do take time. You may be only one business partner servicing a pretty big company. You need to think about scale, okay? And not thinking harder, but thinking smarter or working smarter. So my recommendation is that you find that platform for surveys and start doing these surveys. Because remember, as we just said there, when you move from when you move from face-to-face exit interviews to exit surveys, 40% of the answers change. So it's in your best interest to actually move from face-to-face to those exit surveys so you can get rich data and ultimately provide the best informed decisions possible for you and your organization.
And what I found in my experience is, being that we didn't, we were building from the ground up and we didn't really have any analytics, There were always three that I would start with. The first is around employee turnover. So understanding, how many regrettable leavers you have, and then trying to put a cost associated to that, because that is ultimately going to help you to be able to build and to get, budget and so forth around, putting in some interventions to stop it. And we, Luke and I have built an employee turnover calculator, which is really helpful, I think, in helping, in helping people building a business case around what the cost and what the impact is. It's going to be up on our website in the next couple of weeks. In the meantime, if that's something that we can help you with, as Luke was saying, please feel free to reach out to us. It's really easy. We've built it all in. You just need to plug in the numbers, and you'll come up with a euro or a dollar value. The other one is around employee experience, measuring all those points around, onboarding. How is the onboarding going? We know onboarding, is so important. It's a correlation with how long people are going to stay in your organization, and then around engagement as well. So just 3 ones that I've from experience have started with and have really helped myself.
And that calculator, by the way, it's based off internal and external research. And it's free. So ultimately, it is a great resource to use. There's a massive sample size. So use it, please. And it really will help you to highlight to your decision makers just how big the problem is you're trying to face.
Exactly. Okay, so it's time to close the webinar, Luke. So I think, when you and I were discussing this, the big thing we said is don't wait, start today, go back to your role today, and there are 3 things that you can do immediately. First of all, identify those top 3 business challenges.
Yeah.
And then think about how analytics can solve them. And as you spoke a little bit around, descriptive versus prescriptive, if you're at the beginning of your journey, the analytics that you're going to be using are going to be descriptive. If you're more mature, then start looking at that predictive machine learning piece.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, stay tuned for our white paper.
Yeah, and guys, it's never too late. It is never too late to start. Ultimately, just remember, any decision makers that I work with, that business case. So that employee turnover calculator, if that's what you're focused on, get that. You'll be able to get a dollar figure there, and that will really hammer home just, the potential, the white paper, the white space that for solving that problem, and then go through it step by step. And yes, you're only going to have descriptive metrics to begin with, which is just a statistic showing that point in time. But remember, it's a new technology. There's a lot of resources there. You can be where we are quite soon. But as I said, if you want to skip a lot of difficulties and heartache and everything else, please reach out to us. We're more than happy.
Great, thank you.